In our first story, the president, Akufo-Addo, has arrived in Accra after participating in the just-ended African Union Summit held in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa.
Addressing the media at the Kotoka International Airport, Information Minister designate Mustafa Hamid said the AU at the meeting agreed to an imposition of some 0.2% levy on imports of member states to fund AU activities. He's also been explaining government's role in the election of former Foreign Affairs Minister Mr. Akufo-Addo to the vice chairman position of the African Union.
The African Union has a budget annually of not less than 400 million, between 400 to 500 million dollars every year as its annual budget. But out of that, member countries are able to contribute between 150 to 170 million dollars every year. The rest of it is funded by international bodies and foreign groups and so on. Now, the African Union thinks that it is not acceptable for a group of sovereign and independent nations to be dependent on other nations for the running of their union. So now the African Union has taken a decision that an additional levy of 0.2% be put by all African countries on imports. In other words, an import levy of 0.2% be imposed by all African governments, which will be set aside and put in a fund as those governments' contribution to the AU fund. Now, they also said that all African countries whose GDP is about 4% and above will collectively contribute 60% of the money that the African Union requires every year to run its activities. And those who have a GDP of below 4%, the union itself will determine for them, based on their capacity to pay, how to get the rest of the 40% to make up for the finances of the union. At this summit, a Ghanaian, Ambassador Kwesi, was elected as the deputy chair of the African Union Commission. Daniel Batidam was elected as the chair of the AU Advisory Committee on Corruption. One Mrs. Catherine Ayesu was elected to the African Union Body on International Law. A scientist by name Professor Dakori was given an award that is called the Kwame Nkrumah Award for Scientific Achievement. He shared it jointly with an Egyptian professor, and they got $100,000 each for their efforts in science development and so on.
The Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice is calling on newly appointed ministers to declare their assets, all in compliance with the requirements of the 1992 Constitution.
Article 286 of the 1992 Constitution requires ministers of state to declare their assets before taking office. It's one issue that has often been raised by anti-corruption crusaders, and it came up during the vetting of the first batch of the president's ministerial nominees. Speaking to Joy News, Shrash Commissioner Joseph Whittal believes ministers have no choice than to comply.
Because it is a constitutional obligation. Whether you like it or not, you must declare. And that is why I take the position that the president, Akufo-Addo, he did the right thing by swearing them in and immediately informing them to ensure that within 2 weeks they declare. That is the way to go. You don't have to wait and declare at your own time. And I think over the years, the Commission has always drawn attention of public officers to this requirement to declare immediately, because that is when we get to know your true properties and liabilities.
So you have the position that they should be declaring? They
should declare as early as possible. In fact, 2 weeks is even long. What prevents you after being sworn in? Within a week, you should be able to swear. And you should be able to declare and let people know what you had when you were coming in to office, before the trappings of office gave you the opportunity to start having other properties.
Shouldn't you begin looking at the possible enforcement of this provision? Because clearly if people don't recall doing that, and in some cases people aren't even sure they've done that. Doesn't it raise question about the fact that it's just one of the laws in the show?
It is a regrettable flaw in the Constitution. Why the Constitution decided that when they swear they should seal it and have it delivered to the Auditor General, who keeps it without verifying what they have declared, and it is only when there's a complaint to a court, or there's a case in court, or a complaint to the Commission on Human Rights, that is when the investigator of charge or a judge of the court has power to then direct the Auditor General to release that. Is it not meant for the people of Ghana to know and be able to then ask questions? That is why I'm saying there's a flaw.
The minority in Parliament has dismissed claims by the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, that the NDC government hid expenditures to the tune of some 7 billion Ghana cedis from state coffers between the years 2014 and 2016.
The minority says the amount is captured in a contract database at the Finance Ministry, which Dr. Bawumia should be aware of. Speaking at a forum on corporate governance in Accra Tuesday, Dr. Bawumia said the expenditure had not been disclosed and was only discovered by the current administration whilst preparing the 2017 budgets.
In the management of any economy, there is nothing that can beat the integrity of your economic data, because it's with data that you plan. If you don't have data, you have major problems. And this is why we really need to emphasize the integrity of data. In preparing for this year's budget, for example, we have been very surprised by the fiscal data, the data on our expenditures and on our revenues. As we interrogated the data to see exactly why our public finances are in the state they are, we find out that there's 7 billion Ghana cedis of expenditures that have not been disclosed. And I'm talking 7 billion for ending the year 2016. And these come from 2014, 2015, 2016. So where have they been hiding all these years? And how are you supposed to manage an economy with faulty data? And so we have to emphasize that, getting the data right is really very key, because it throws the entire budget into disarray, because you are going into 2017 and suddenly you are told, by the way, there's 7 billion that you have to pay next year that you didn't anticipate. This is the reality.
Well, so it's been counted. And at a press conference in Accra, former Deputy Finance Minister Akufo-Addo said the expenditures were captured under a new financial management system called the Ghana Integrated Financial Management Information System, known to many of us as GIFMIS, which he says the current government does not understand.
He further explained it previously took 3 to 6 months for expenditures to appear on government database as arrears that the state should pay, but that under GIFMIS, expenditures are captured immediately, hence the 7 billion cedis figure.
The campaigns are over. The campaigns are over. So we want to urge the Vice President to desist from making certain pronouncements that will not help the cause of the country. The amount in question he's making reference to are indeed part of the contract database. They are part of outstanding commitment that, as part of a major initiative launched by the President Mahama-led administration, the Ministry of Finance established the contract database for the purposes of us having a complete view of what the pipeline is. Therefore, instead of the conventional way of seeing arrest as 3 to 6 months, we looking at arrest and commitment over a fiscal year and in some cases a multi-year commitment as reported in the medium-term expenditure framework.
Well, the minority says it will also respond to these statements coming from the former finance minister later today. And ahead of that, a former presidential staffer has been responding to that claim.
Clement Apak says Dr. Bawumia's claim is misleading.
As far as we know, the amount paid and as far as the ongoing construction of the vice president's residence is concerned, is what the paper you quoted has indicated, slightly above 5 million. 5.9 million because it's certainly not 13.9 million. That is why I said slightly.
Okay.
In any case, it is on record that on the day that the then vice president, Emisata, was part of the entourage where Vice President-elect then Bawumia was touring the Five House, it was made known to him by Emisata about this ongoing construction, to which even then Vice President Emisata in the briefing told Dr. Bawumia that he had become aware that a payment of about 5.9 million had been made to the contractor, despite the fact that work had not been completed. Indeed, Emisata raised a lot of concern, and he made that known to the current vice president. But remember that the contractor who is working on this has been working with the Architectural and Engineering Services Limited, which is the agency responsible for overseeing this. So if the current government has any problems with the cost involved, I think the best thing is that AESL is still present, available, and it's still the government agency overseeing the construction of this vice president's, if you like, abode.
And Dr. Clement Apak was also responding in that insert to allegations that there was a bloated contract of a sort for a house accommodation for a vice president of the Republic of Ghana. We know the matter was raised by the vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, earlier at that very governance forum. Oh, we have to move on and go to the court. And former Attorney General Martin Amidu will no longer be a party in a case in which a private legal practitioner is seeking to stop the oral examination of businessman Alfred Agbesi-Woyome on the whereabouts of a 51 million Ghana cedi judgment debt paid him by the state.
The highly anticipated oral examination was suspended following the action by David Ambatapa, who wants the Supreme Court to determine whether the judge who granted the relief to Mr. Amidu, Justice Enim Yeboah, had the power to do so. There's more in the following report.
What the court set out to determine was whether private legal practitioner David Amethefe had the capacity to initiate the action as well as the propriety of the means used. The legal practitioner went to court following a decision by Justice Enim Yeboah, sitting as a sole judge, to allow the former Attorney General Martin Amidu to orally examine businessman Alfred Woyome. He had wanted an interpretation on the extent to which a single justice of the court can act, as well as an order from the court to halt the planned oral examination. Martin Amidu raised an initial objection, questioning David Amethefe's capacity. Justice Ofaya Akufo, reading the judgment of the 7-member panel, said David Amethepe had appropriately invoked the jurisdiction of the court. The panel, however, disagreed with him on those listed as defendants. The court held that Martin Amidu does not qualify to be a defendant in the suit. A cost of 5,000 cedis was awarded against David Amethepe.
And that's it for the news. We have a lot more interactive news as we review the newspapers. They are in the studio, and then we'll look at some of the stories on the online portal. We should tell you, the Black Stars will be playing their Cameroonian counterparts today in the last leg of the semi-finals. If they win the match, they will get to meet the Egyptians. If they lose, they'll play a third-place match.
Which nobody cares about, really. Stay with us. We have the newspapers up next.